In my eyes, I joined the Army when I was like 9 or 10 years old. I
Right.
loved walking out in the morning and seeing my shadow walking across my driveway of my uniform.
We're the ones who have to exercise restraint at the same time, enough force to catch the bad guy.
I will never be able to get that sound out of my brain.
You know, what's next for Kurt?
Like every cop that deals with traumatic situations, you fucking bury it.
Hey, this is Lou Pimber today. I want to welcome you guys to Lou Pimber Speaks. Today, I have a very special guest. He's actually someone that I actually know personally, that I've gotten to know in my time in law enforcement. And actually, I got to know him better after I got out of law enforcement. And you know, this gentleman here, his name is Kurt Dabb. He is look, he's been a deputy for now. You were a deputy for, I think, how many years did you put in deputy?
Yeah, I'm still not officially retired right now, but September 2nd will be my 20th year.
20 years as a deputy in Pima County, and then you spent some time in the Army as well in the infantry. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was active duty 90 to 94 as an infantryman, and then another 11 years in the Reserve and National Guard as a military police officer.
Right on, man. And during that law enforcement time, he spent times in not only in patrol, but also in homicide as well. So today we're going to delve into the life of a retired, about to be retired homicide detective. You know, homicide detectives, they fulfill a lot of duties. And one of those duties happens to be, and some of the most critical duties in law enforcement. And they basically investigate circumstances that often lead to and result in the death of people. You know, the most precious thing we have today is life. And it takes a homicide detective to get in there and identify and search and look for what the cause was of it, and who the perpetrator was that did this. And here, what I looked up about a homicide detective, it says you're a highly skilled, well-trained professional that understands human behavior. Some of the skills that are required to be a homicide detective. Okay, you tell me if I'm wrong, Kurt. And homicide detectives attempt to solve worst cases, right? Some of the worst cases out there, murder, all sorts of different things, with logic, reason, with organization, efficiency, and high ethical standards. Kurt Dabb, I'm sure that leaves out a lot of things. But today we have Mr. Kurt Dabb, retired sheriff deputy out here in Pima County, and predominantly a homicide detective. Kurt, welcome to the show. I appreciate you, man. Thank you for your service to our great nation as a soldier, and to your service to our community today. Thank you very much, Kurt.
Thank you, and thank you for your friendship over these many years. It's been a pleasure to know you, brother.
I don't know. I appreciate that. So, Kurt, all right. So you're where are you originally from?
I'm originally from a small town in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan,
Okay.
the UP. So I'm a Uper. You know, Upper Michigan is separated by the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula. The people from the UP are called Upers, and the people from down below the Mackinac Bridge, they're called Trolls, affectionately known as Trolls.
All right.
So
you're a Uper.
I'm a Uper from God's country.
Okay, yes. So you're upper class then. You're kind of an upper class kind of.
No, never upper class.
Right on. So you're married. You have. Is it 2 children, 2 kids?
I am. I'm married to my wife, Sarah. We just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary back in March.
Wow.
And I have two kids: a son who's a senior in high school, and a daughter who's going to be a sophomore.
Right on. So let me take you back a little. You did you join the Army while you were in Michigan, or where did that start at?
In my eyes, I joined the Army when I was like 9 or 10 years old.
Okay.
We had a recruiting station about a block away from one of the houses that I lived at. And that was back in the days when they used to sponsor drag racing cars. And they had this awesome kick-ass cobra snake on the side of a dragster.
Yes.
And I used to go over there and collect stickers and look at books about the infantry and, you know, all this high speed stuff that military guys do. But yeah, I continued on a family tradition of military service. My grandfather served in World War II. He was at D-Day +3, I think.
Wow.
My father served during the Vietnam era. He didn't serve in Vietnam, but his 3 other brothers did. And my grandmother graciously wrote a bunch of letters campaigning to not let her 4th son go over to Vietnam. And, you know, he was fortunate enough, you know, not to have to go over there.
Got it.
And yeah, I joined the Army when I was 17, delayed entry program. And I left for basic training 12 days after high school.
Right on.
In 1990, June 12th.
You know, you said something very interesting. As far as you were concerned, you were already a soldier at the age of 9.
Yeah.
And see, and that speaks to something very profound, because, you know, some people are just born wanting to serve their country and their community, and other people eventually kind of grow into it and they blossom into that. You know, as little boys, we're the dragon slayers, right? We're the good guys. We wear the white hat. And so I was very similar in that way, that as a kid, I always saw myself as the hero, the knight in shining armor. So it sounds like you were kind of the same. As a 9-year-old kid, you were already serving. Were you a private? What rank were you at 9?
Yeah, hell, I was a general. What are you talking about? Yeah, no, I wanted to be an infantryman. I wanted to, as stupid as it sounds, I wanted to go to war. I wanted to serve my country.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a grunt. And I knew that grunts were the ones that were out, you know, bringing the pain. And that's what I wanted to do from a young age.
Right on, man. Right on. And so you did how many years total, bud?
I served from 1990 to 1994.
Okay.
So I got out of basic, Desert Shield kicked off while I was in basic training, and graduated basic training. And, you know, our drill sergeants, a handful of them were Vietnam veterans. So when Desert Shield kicked off, the shit really hit the fan at basic training.
Yeah.
You know, we listened.
Yeah.
Sponges.
Right. All of a sudden, things got very real, and you sort of appreciate the instruction, the grinding and all that stuff was just, the smoking was just, let's just get it over with and let's get on to the good stuff. It's very different.
I looked at it like I'm getting smoked by bona fide war heroes.
Yeah.
You know, these Vietnam veterans walking around with their CI combat infantry badges, their Ranger tabs, their airborne tabs, their special forces tabs.
Yeah.
These were the guys that set the standard and who I wanted to emulate while I was in the military.
Right on, man. And so what brought you to Arizona?
So I got out of the Army in 1994. I told my squad leader I was ETSing, you know, I was getting out, and he's like, "What the hell are you going to do?" I'm like, "I don't know." I said, "I think I'm going to go to college." He's like, "You're not going to do anything." He's like, "What kind of job are you going to get being a grunt? You know, you served in war." I was in Desert Storm with the 24th Infantry Division. You know, all you know is grunt stuff. And I took that as a challenge. You know, yeah, I could have stayed in and made a comfortable life for 20 years in the military, but I knew that there were bigger and better things for me out there. So
look, there's a big demand for foxholes.
Yeah.
There's a big demand for a 0-1 in a rifle. Right?
Absolutely.
There's a big demand for a fire line. There's a big demand for all that stuff, man.
Yeah.
Right on. So let me tell you something. In your time in 90 to 94, when you served during Desert Shield, what your MOS was, you were 11 Bravo Infantry, is that right?
I actually went in. So at that time when I went in, they had 11 Bravo, 11 Hotel, which was a tow missile crewman. Be driving around on a Humvee. 11 Charlie, I believe, was mortars, and 11 Mike, or 11 X-ray. I was all gung ho. I went in that day and signed my paperwork. So I want to be a grunt. That's what I want to do. I want to be an infantryman. I want to be on the ground, a ground pounder. And unfortunately to me, or for me, you know, that was an early lesson on making sure I read contracts before I sign anything. Because
Okay. And so
they
what'd you get?
signed me up as an 11 X-ray, and I ended up being an 11 Mike, which is an infantryman that rides around in a Bradley fighting vehicle.
Okay. Oh, that's not too
So
bad,
hey,
I guess.
I didn't have to walk everywhere. I got driven around in a
Yeah,
tracked
it's not
vehicle.
bad.
No, it was all right.
Right on. So you got out, you still served as a reservist for National Guardsman, and was that in Arizona, or how'd you end up in Arizona?
No, so I went back home to the Upper Peninsula, and I attended school at Northern Michigan University,
Okay.
which is located in Marquette, Michigan. So I went there from 1994 to 1998. And during that whole time, I was in the National Guard at my local hometown. They were originally an engineer battalion, but then they switched over to military police. So I got reclassified as an MP. So I graduated in December of 1998 with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. And,
Got it.
you know, my goal was to become a Fed of some sort, working for one of the alphabet agencies. But it didn't pan out that way.
Okay. And so what brought you out to Arizona?
I met my wife up at Northern Michigan University,
Okay.
Sarah, and we fell in love, and we decided she had family who lived out here in Tucson, and we came to visit a couple of times, and we both, you know, fell in love with the place. She had been out here before.
Okay.
And, it was the mountains, man, you know.
Yeah.
I loved it. So we decided we had nothing tying us back to the UP except my family, but you know, they'll always be around. And we took a chance. Two young lovers with nothing to do, you know.
This sounds like a 1970s love ballad, man.
Yeah.
And so you came out here, and you met, and I know I've met Sarah before. Lovely lady. She's a hard charger, man. And so she's obviously the kind of she's your number one fan.
She wears the pants in the family.
I was gonna say that, but I didn't want to say it.
No, she could kick my ass, and I'm not afraid to admit it. And she's a lot smarter than I am too.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
You know, I remember Sarah at the CrossFit gym, and I was like, "This she's hardcore, man. She's hardcore."
Yeah, she used to boss you around, right?
Yeah,
I used to enjoy that.
Yeah,
because I'm like, she boss other people around. She can leave me alone when she gets
That's
home.
right, man. You know, so you served as a Pima County Sheriff's deputy, and how long was that? When did that start for you?
So I was hired. I started the academy on September 2nd, 2001, 9 days before 9/11.
Okay.
And went through the basic academy, which at that time for us was out at the Tucson Police Department's academy.
Okay.
And graduated there and went to our advanced basic FTO program, and then started working patrol up in the Foothills District, which is on the northwest side of town.
Okay. And you did a couple years of patrol, and then you end up, was homicide something you always wanted to do, or was just the opening came up, or how did you end up in homicide?
It was always something that I wanted to do.
Okay.
From day one, whenever there was a murder up in the district where I was working, I made it a point to reach out to the detectives and the sergeant to see if there was anything I, as a rookie beat cop, could do. And you know, at first, the first couple of years, I was told just stay out of it and let the professionals handle it.
Yeah.
And I was okay with that. But it's something that I always wanted to do.
But you were kind of on the spot. You were ready to help out in any way. So you always take an initiative.
Yeah, I was getting my name out there. You know, I took every training that I could go to just to make myself more marketable for the future, to advance to where what my ultimate goal was, being in homicide.
So tell me, you got into homicide. What year was that?
I originally got in there in 2009.
Okay.
So I served my first 3 years from beginning of 2009 to the end of 2012, December 31st, 2012.
Was this the time when your career really started, like, okay, things just got real now, or just real on a whole different level? Is that where it kind of took off from there? Or at which point was it that in your law enforcement career, you realized, okay, the whole job of a law enforcement officer is to go out there and catch the bad guys because no one else is going to do it. Yeah. The whole job of a law enforcement officer is, yeah, we serve a lot, but our job is to protect. And sometimes that involves getting the bad guy. Yeah. You know, at which point did law enforcement become very real for you in that sense?
From day one.
Okay.
I was, still am referred to affectionately a shit magnet. So I was constantly, I made it my goal when I was on the street to get as much experience as possible.
Yeah.
And I was looking for guns. I was looking for drugs. I was looking for felony warrants. I was looking for murder suspects, stolen cars, you name it. I was out looking, and I was taught how to do that by the older guys on the squad, you know, that I had 5, 10, 15 years on.
Right.
And I was a sponge. It became really real for me when in 2002, my brother-in-law was a Detroit police officer, and he was killed in the line of duty in Detroit. And that's when it really hit home that, you know, I could die doing this job.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later, a classmate of mine, Patrick Hardesty from Tucson Police Department, was killed in line of duty here in town.
Mm-hmm.
And then very shortly after that, I was involved in my first officer-involved shooting. So within those first 5 years of being a cop, it became very real. But I loved it. I loved every minute of it. Right. I loved walking out in the morning and seeing my shadow walking across my driveway of my uniform and getting in my cop car, which when I started was a 1990 Capri Classic. It was called White Lightning.
Yeah.
You know, it was a big square box. It had a bench seat.
Yeah.
I'd do a traffic stop. When I was walking up to the, you know, violator vehicle, I'd have to pop the fucking hood, you know, I mean, so it wouldn't overheat. But, you know, those first 5 years of my law enforcement career, I endured a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
You know, I dealt with 2 very close individuals that were killed in the line of duty. And then being involved in a shooting myself, you know, it made it really, really real.
You know, what people don't understand, I think, is that the role of a law enforcement officer, and I said it a minute ago, but I have to repeat it because people need to understand that the role of the law enforcement officer is to be the protector. We are the ones who get called in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
We're the ones that show up at people's lowest point or most violent point or scariest point in their life. And we're the ones who have to restore order. We're the ones who have to exercise restraint at the same time, enough force to catch the bad guy. And we're expected just to be okay. Yeah. You know, and so in your first 5 years, you experienced a lot of that right there. And so at which point did you start seeing, did you start doubting your decision to be in law enforcement, or did it just reinforce that you were at the right place, right time?
I never doubted my decision to be a cop once, but shortly after my first shooting is when I noticed behavioral changes, you know, different things going on inside my head, different ways I would deal with, you know, situations. And yeah.
Was any of that, was there any tie to your time in Desert Shield during wartime? Did any of that kind of become fuzzy? That it become sort of, did you question that at all?
Yeah, no, there was no issues at all, you know, being over in Desert Storm. I was an 18-year-old kid, you know, I was gung-ho and ready to go, and nothing that I saw or participated in over there really traumatized me. And to be truthful, you know, I got over there 2 weeks before the ground war started, and I left 2 weeks after. So I was only there for a month total.
Got it. Got it.
I didn't have to endure all the nonsense, you know, that year or year and a half, however long Desert Shield was, the buildup was to the actual conflict. And the actual conflict, you know, for me was riding around in the back of a Bradley, you know, fighting vehicle, listening to gunfire of 25 millimeter cannons and tow missiles.
Got it.
Saw, you know, some action, but it was not anything that caused any issues, you know, for me.
Now, going to now Kurt Dabb, your first 5 years in law enforcement, what were some of the telltale signs to you at that early point in your career that something doesn't feel right? What were they?
So it started in 2007 is when I went to my agency and told them that something was wrong. And I didn't know what it was. I know now it was anxiety, it was panic, it was fear, it was loneliness, it was depression, it was alcoholism. It was the signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress.
So your first 5 years in law enforcement, they're pretty critical, and obviously change the dynamic in your career moving forward. You mentioned alcoholism. What was going on at the time in terms of alcoholism?
So I'm a guy that doesn't have a governor. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And once I start, I'm not going to stop.
Yeah.
I wasn't violent. I wasn't mean. As a matter of fact, everybody misses drunk Kurt because I was a clown.
Yeah.
But, it got to the point where when I would get off work on my weekend, I would just drink.
Yeah.
Until the weekend was over. And I'm happy to say that I'm 10 years sober right now. June 8th was my 10th year being sober.
Right on, man.
And that probably was the biggest thing that saved my life.
Now, what caused you to then say, hey, you know what, I got to stop this drinking? Was it affecting your performance on the job, your relationship with your wife, with your kids? What was it?
Yeah, it was a familial thing. It never affected my job because I only drank on the weekends. But I grew up the son of an alcoholic who grew up the son of an alcoholic, and so on and so forth. So it's in my DNA. And, it got to the point to where my marriage was going to end if I didn't do something to fix it, And so that's what it boiled down to. It was familial, things.
Got it.
And I love my wife and I love my kids, and I didn't want to lose them.
Got it. And from there, is that around the time when you started in Homicide?
So I started in 2009 in Homicide. So I was still drinking my first 2 years in Homicide. So I got up to be a detective. I worked in the robbery assault unit. I worked in the night detective squad, and there was an opening in Homicide, and my name was, being thrown around as, possibly someone that could go in there. And I was given the opportunity to do so, and I turned it down initially, right? It's the goal that I was working for my entire career up to that point.
Yeah.
And I turned it down because I was afraid. This was in 2008-ish.
Yeah.
And I was afraid. I didn't think I was a good enough cop to be a homicide detective.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was professional enough to be a homicide detective. I didn't think that I had the knowledge or experience to be a homicide detective.
Is it because you knew deep down inside, you knew your secrets, and you knew that some of the habits weren't going to be helpful in being a homicide detective, or what was it?
No, it had nothing to do with that. By that time, I had already been going to counseling. I went and saw, I told the department what was going on. I went and got evaluated. I was diagnosed, back then. I started going to therapy. So that stuff was kind of in check. It was just, it was an internal fear of failure is what it was, going over dealing with, the best of the best, the cream of the crop detectives. They're the ones that get into homicide, and the fear of failure is always present. And I let it take control of me and prevent me from attaining my goal a year earlier than I could have.
Okay. So what changed? What changed at that point? How'd you address that?
I just talked to everybody, in the unit, other homicide detectives, and they're like, look, bro, you're fucking ready. We don't do there's no magic into being a homicide detective. You know, you do cop work, you investigate, you do interviews. And finally I said, all right, fuck it. Let's do this. Let's go.
So you get into homicide now. And so what was that like for you? How did that change Kurt Dabb? How did that change your law enforcement career? Or did it change your perspective on law enforcement?
I was just in awe of the people that I worked with. And, you know, that's a misconception that you get. And you look at cop movies, right? Most cop movies are either narcs like yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because they're exciting and they're action packed, or they're on homicide detectives.
Yeah.
There are not many movies just on beat cops. But in those films, they always focus on, you know, the one person. But homicide, it takes a team, because no one person is able to solve a homicide. And if anyone tells you different, they're a liar. It takes a team, and you have to be able to work yourself into that team and absorb everything that is being taught while you're on the job. It's on the job training.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
for someone who's never experienced that, for someone who's never been to a crime scene, what does that look like? And perhaps, you know, some of the worst crime scenes you've been to, what does that look like?
You see the worst in humanity.
Yeah.
The depravity it's almost unspeakable, because the things that we do to each other as human beings, when you see the worst of the worst, it's pretty fucking bad. The worst case that I had two of them a couple of years ago, and they involved, you know, kids being killed by their family members, and those are the worst, because no matter what anybody said, kids are innocent victims.
Right.
But I mean, unless you're a 15-year-old running around, you know, trying to do drug rips or some, you know, stupid shit like that.
Yeah.
Kids are truly innocent victims, and to see innocent victims being killed by loved ones is just fucking traumatic, man.
You know, for someone who's never been on a crime scene, you know, people see these on TV shows like CSI and other nonsense like that, and a lot of them are just so far-fetched, so unrealistic. You know, what shows like that are missing is they're missing the blood-curdling screams from people, the distraught mother, the overwhelming smell of blood, of bodily fluids, feces, all these things that you find on a crime scene. And Kurt, I mean, that's something you had to deal with on a regular basis. You get that phone call, you have to show up. It isn't like Kurt can say, you know what, I think I'm going to pass on this one.
Yeah.
You just have to go.
Those blood-curdling screams on 911 calls, or going and doing a death notification and letting a mother know that her child has just been the victim of a homicide. That's something that I'll live with forever. I will never be able to get that sound out of my brain. I don't know if you've, you know, ever did any death notifications, you know, in your time as a street cop, but yeah, it's a mother screaming because her child, something that was a part of her for 9 months, is no longer around. I don't even think Hollywood could replicate it.
No. And you know, when you have to deliver that kind of news to a mother or father, a spouse, or other loved one, I mean, there's no other way to do that other than just to tell them. No. And you can't mince words. It's got to be to the point. So and so has died.
Well, look, you know, it's if the cops show up at your house at 3 a.m, it's not for a good reason.
Right.
And you're absolutely 100% correct. You know, the way I learned and the way I was taught is you make contact and you get to the point, because they know something bad happened. They
Right.
just don't know who it happened to. And the longer you delay giving that bad news, the more traumatic it is for the parents, who are also victims.
Right.
In this whole thing. So yeah, you have to, ma'am, I'm Detective Dabb with the Sheriff's Department. I'm sorry to say that, your son or daughter was killed tonight. And then you just sit there and endure what comes for the next 15, 20 minutes, half hour.
Yeah. And you have to stand there and you take it, man.
Yeah.
It's so it's very unreal for the average person is to understand what that's like. To be a total stranger and deliver that kind of news to someone. You now become the vessel, and where they just unleash all of that to you.
Yeah.
All of it, whether it be anger, rage, frustration, confusion, just sheer horror, sadness,
compassion.
You have you absorb all that, man.
Yeah.
And look, you can only do that for so long. And so you do it long enough. Eventually, that stuff starts sticking. You bring that stuff home, and it affects the way you live. It affects the way you talk, the way you sleep, how you live your life, how you love your wife, how you do everything. And people need to understand that the life of a law enforcement officer, it isn't glamorous. You don't do it for the money. You do it because you want to serve your community. In the life of a homicide detective, it takes place generally at night for some reason, and you're sitting there and you're having to piece this scene together while maintaining yourself together and having to solve a crime and bring resolution and closure to a family, man. How do you deal with that?
Like every cop that deals with traumatic situations, you fucking bury it. You bury it in the back of your head. And you hope that it stays there forever.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, that it's not, because it's going to rear its ugly head at the most inopportune times. And yeah, that's what happened to me.
I have this picture here that you shared with me. I'm gonna put it up here so people can see what we're talking about. But this picture, it says so many things, man. And I know the artist, Lillian George, and it says so many things. So in this picture, you'll see there's a patrol car, and that patrol car carries the burdens of the world, things that were said to you, the things you had to see, endure, and just keep to yourself and have to deal with. And then outside that vehicle is a deputy, which looks like it might be you, right, with no hair.
Yeah.
And you got a little boy right there coming to you, and he just wants dad. And then you look beyond that, and you got the wife who's happy you're home, but you got shit to do, bro. Kids got to go to karate. The dog's got to be taken for a walk. You got to fix the plumbing. And then in between that is that tree that they say in the academy, you're supposed to hang all your issues on that tree before you go inside that house.
Yeah.
But you and I both know that isn't the case, man.
No,
that isn't the case.
I asked Lillian, who's a dear friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with her on a night detective squad.
Mm-hmm.
To write that or draw that picture. I told her, I said, hey, you've made some funny cartoons about some stupid shit, that I've done the past, at that time, I think 15 years. I'm like, I've got all this stuff going on in my head right now, and I want to be able to look at it. I want it to make sense to me and to make sense to others. When they see that as a cop, you will immediately recognize it. Because what I wanted to do, none of us want to take our job home.
Right.
Right. Because like you said, we've got other stuff to do, man.
Right.
We've got a family to care for.
Right.
We've got dinner to cook. We've got rooms to vacuum. We got trash to take out. We got kids to take to school. I wanted to keep all of that shit that was dealt to me that day I know it's already up here, but I felt if I could just lock it in my car and it would sit there and fester during the night. And then when I got back into that car in the morning after, how many hours of respite, I would be calm enough and okay with myself to deal with it again. And so, getting in my cop car at the beginning of my career, I was really excited, seeing the shadows, driving, turning on my lights and sirens. And later on in my career, after the numerous traumatic events, that I experienced, I dreaded getting back in my cop car because I knew those things in that picture were waiting for me.
Yeah.
They were waiting.
And those things, they know when to rear their ugly head. They know when you are weak. They know, and that's when they creep up on you, man. And it leads to so many things. It leads to ideations of suicide. It leads to all sorts of things, bad habits and things like that. One of the things though that you've got going for you though is I can tell is you're sort of like an open book. It's kind of easy to read where you're at, and that I think is what has helped you cope with some of this, because even though you've probably bottled a lot of it up and held it inside, you've been wise enough to let some of that leak,
Yeah.
and ask for help.
Look, man, there's a couple of ways cops get out of this business.
Mm-hmm.
You may retire after doing your 20 years, and you're more than likely going to be out of shape, and you're going to die. Statistics show within 6 months to a year, a shit ton of cops die after they retire.
Yep.
Or you're going to fall prey to the booze. You're going to fall prey to the drugs. You're going to fall prey to abusing your spouse or your kids. You're going to get a DUI. You're going to get arrested. You're going to go to jail. And then you're going to eat your fucking gun.
Yeah.
Or you can take care of yourself physically and mentally, and in the hopes when you retire, you're able to outlive that 6 months, to a year time period where we're pretty vulnerable after retiring. And I made the decision again back this past September to seek some help. I was in a pretty dark downward spiral.
Yeah.
I was hurting so much inside that I didn't want to be anymore. I didn't want to be. Right. I hurt so much. And no one could tell. I'm a good faker. You're a good faker. Cops are actors, man.
Right.
We're actors. We're salesmen, saleswomen.
Right.
And there came a point in September where I had 3 homicide investigations back to back to back, all within a few days, a week, 4 or 5 days. And one of them involved a 4.5-month-old baby that really fucked me up. And I started having these suicidal ideations again. And it wasn't a monthly thing. It wasn't a weekly thing. It wasn't a daily thing. It was in every fucking second of every fucking day.
Right.
I thought about ending it. I never made a plan. I never went to my garage like so many of our brothers and sisters do, or to a bedroom or the backyard and take the gun out and put it up. But I was hurting so bad, I just wanted to die. And I was like, you know what? Fuck this. And again, no one noticed it. My family noticed it, but I never told them what was going on inside. Because again, I wanted to not bring work home, but work found its own way to bring itself home.
Right. It always does.
And so I reached out to a dear friend and learned about EMDR therapy. And so I called up right away, and ever since the second week in September, I've been going to EMDR therapy once a week, man. And it has done wonders for me.
Can you describe that a little bit? EMDR therapy?
So EMDR therapy is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. And you remember growing up watching the Knight Rider show, right?
Yep.
And Kit, the car, had the red light that would go back and forth. And that's basically what it is. You, and I tell my therapist all the time, I'm like, this is the stupidest fucking thing in the world, that I can sit here and watch this light go back and forth.
Yeah.
And it worked, but it works.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll think of a traumatic event that happened to me. And one that we, you know, have been working on quite a bit is my first shooting in 2006. And so I start thinking about that, and even talking about it, I can feel the anxiety, the tightness in my chest, you know, the panic, the fear, the loneliness. And then she turns on this light, and I watch it go across and just think about what's happening. And what it's doing is it's allowing your brain to process that information, because as cops, we don't have the luxury of going through the 7 stages of grieving, right?
Right.
You could go to a car accident where 2 people are killed, bodies are mangled everywhere. You get there as a patrol officer, you try to render aid, you can't render aid. Traffic guys come, they investigate it, you go on to the next call. Your next call could be a stabbing. Your next call could be a child abuse. And then you go on from that call to the next call. So you don't have the opportunity to process what the fuck just happened. Your brain doesn't have the opportunity, or you don't have the opportunity to grieve, to feel sadness and anger and sorrow, because you just push it back.
Right.
And EMDR therapy allows you to do that. And I've done a total 180.
Good, man.
Since
Good.
September, man.
Good. How do you feel now? Better?
I feel great. Yeah.
Good, man.
I'm not 100%. And, you know, I always ask, am I ever going to be normal again?
Yeah.
You know, because as cops, we don't feel normal. Because,
right.
You know, we deal with bad people doing bad shit.
You know, when you live a life very hypervigilant for so many years, and then dealing with violence, and then dealing with loss, and then dealing with close calls, and then constant danger, I think it really reprograms you in so many different ways. And it took me years to work on that myself, you know, and I also found different ways to cope with things. I've been down many of the paths you just described, you know, and I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry that you went through that. I'm sorry your family had to endure that. But I thank you for serving our country, and I thank you for serving our community. You know, the goal for me when I talk to people is, we talk about post-traumatic stress, but let's take that and let's create it into some sort of post-traumatic success, man.
Yeah.
You know, let's take that post-trauma and be successful in spite of it. You know, be successful in spite of it. And so, you know, one of the questions that I have for you is, you know, what's next for Kurt?
You know, I don't know yet, man. So I'm still in the process of retiring, and it came, you know, very sudden. On May 3rd, I had my last homicide trial. I found out on May 3rd that the guy got convicted of the murder. And on May 4th, you know, I found out that I couldn't be a cop anymore. You know, I didn't meet the minimum qualifications to be a cop because of my diagnosis and the things on the job that cause triggers, you know, cause anxiety, cause that hypervigilance, cause that fear, that aggression. So I'm going through the retirement process right now, and I'm hoping that September, October, you know, it'll be finalized, and I don't know what the next step is, but I do know that, and I've done a couple of podcasts, and the reason that I do them is because I want my brothers and sisters to know that you're not alone in the way that you feel. There are people that you go to work with every single day that are feeling the same way that you are. And no one ever talked about it, Lou, when you were working and when I was working. It's not the 1950s or 60s or 70s anymore, or even 80s, where you can take John Doe behind the Circle K and you guys duke it out and you brush each other off and then you carry on, you know, with the rest of your workday. And, you know, John Doe goes home. What happens now is cops become aggressive. They use more force than maybe they should. They get drunk, they get a DUI, you know, all those things that I talked about before, because they keep it in.
Right.
And one thing that I credit is the men and women coming back from the global war on terror, Afghanistan and Iraq, and how social media just blew up when they came back. And the next thing you know, there's guys starting businesses selling t-shirts. There's guys getting into acting. There's guys and girls writing books about the things that they endured fighting for our country. And that kind of told me that, hey, you're not alone, Kurt.
Yeah, there's
people that feel the way you feel.
Yeah.
And it's okay to talk about it.
It is okay, man. You have to, because look, like I said before, if you don't talk about it, you sit there, you rehash it in your head for years, and it just sits there and eventually it works its way to your heart. And it gets to your heart, and eventually it comes out in the way you live. It comes out out of your pores, and you become a very bad.
Sweat it.
Yes. You become a very, very bad person. And you know, you don't want that for your family. You know, so you know, what advice do you give to the next generation of law enforcement, the next generation of homicide detectives? What advice do you give them?
Man, you know, I tell my my therapist and anybody that'll listen, there's a big talk around the community about mental health. The tragic shooting that happened this past weekend in the city. The first thing that people started talking about, to include law enforcement officials in the news media, was this had something to do with this suspect's mental health. But there was no mention in there at all about the mental health of the officers that responded to that. Correct. The officer that had to shoot that guy that was trying to kill him, and had already killed 2 other people and tried to kill 2 more. Mental health is uber important for law enforcement. And if we could find the time when that first traumatic situation happens to a young deputy or a young officer or a border patrol agent or whatever, and get them the therapy that they need, real therapy, not this peer support that is purported to be therapy, not this employees, you know, assistance program that we all have. I'm talking about talking to people that know what they're talking about. Until that happens, you know, we're in for a long haul, because the mental health of the first responders is just as important as the mental health of the civilians, the citizens that we serve.
For sure.
My advice to new cops and old cops alike is, when you start getting those feelings of anxiety and panic and aggressiveness and ultra, you know, hyper alert, talk to somebody. be honest with yourself. You cannot ask for help without being humble.
Exactly. You have to humble yourself. You're absolutely right. And
You have to
they
be
should
humble.
be able to
You have to
ask for help without fear of any kind of repercussions.
Yeah. And you know, without fear of what I'm going through right now. You know, initially I was very angry. I was very sad about the predicament that I was in. But I know that it's the right thing for me, and I know that it's the right thing for my family. Contrary to popular belief, the departments do have our best interests at heart. They really do, and I truly believe that. Sometimes it doesn't come across that way, the right way, and a lot of times the things that they have in place to help us are not effective.
True.
And I'm just hoping that in the future that something will be in place that will take care of us as much as we try to take care of the citizens that we serve.
So, Kurt, let me take you down. This is your life, okay? So, deep down inside, right? What is the undeniable force, okay, that has at the very core of Kurt Dabb that has driven your actions? Okay, now the undeniable force that's driven your actions as a soldier. What was that force?
Service.
Service. As a patrol deputy.
Service.
As a homicide detective.
Service.
How about it as a husband?
Service.
Okay.
Love.
And a father?
You know, love and compassion. You know, and when I used to give death notifications, Lou, it was, I'm a hugger, bro. Because I could only imagine if someone came to my house and gave me that devastating news that I don't care who is standing there, I would just want to hug.
Yeah.
And you don't want to get emotionally involved and or attached to these cases and these victims and their families, but just that simple gesture, that compassion goes a long way. And even if the victim is, you know, somebody that was a less than noble person, they still had a family that cared for them and held out some hope that they would be the person that they knew that they could always be.
So, Kurt, what undeniable force drives you now? What undeniable force drives you now?
I want to be an advocate, and I want to let cops and firefighters and dispatchers and our photographers that photograph crime scenes, they see more blood and gore than any homicide detective would see. I want all the people in law enforcement to know that it's okay to feel the way you feel and that it's okay to talk about it. That's my goal in doing these things and talking about this, is to spread the word, because whenever I post something on social media about the things that I'm dealing with or do one of these, I get text messages, direct messages, phone calls from cops from different agencies saying that, hey bro, thank you, and just to let you know that I'm with you. I'm feeling the same way. And what I started doing is I started a peer support group that has nothing to do with the agency. And we meet a bunch of cops from a couple of different agencies, some retired cops even. And we just talk about the things that are going on in our lives. And it's been awesome. So again, what is driving me now is just more service. Okay. To continue to serve, and my brothers and sisters in blue and green and everything else.
When when you're old, or perhaps when you're long gone from this earth, what do you want your peers to say about you, man? Your peers, your fellow colleagues, your fellow cops. What do you want them to say about you?
That I was an honest, open, and funny guy.
What about your wife?
I don't ask for much. Well, she tells me all the time that she loves me. And better yet, she tells me all the time that she's still in love with me. So that's all that I can ask. You know, I just strive to be a good husband. I strive to be a good father. They don't write books on that shit. And
there's no manual.
Nope. Do I make mistakes? Absolutely. Do I try not to repeat those mistakes, just like in anything else in life? Absolutely.
Kurt, what do you want your kids? What do you want your kids to say about you when you're long gone?
That I was a good father. That I did right by them. That I taught them the things that they needed to succeed in life. That I always tried to be a better person today than I was yesterday.
Right on, man. I do know that you're a big runner. You do some ultra running. You do like 100 milers or some craziness like that. Tell me about that.
So, well, when I quit, I started doing CrossFit in 2009.
Yeah.
And we met, I think, the next year.
Yeah.
And when I quit drinking, and 10 years ago in 2011, I had to replace an unhealthy habit, drinking alcohol and getting drunk, with a healthy habit.
Right.
So I went full on. And 2014, I ran a half marathon, and I did pretty good. I finished like an hour and 30 minutes. And I was sitting down at home, and I'm like, well, what can I do next? I'm like, I got to figure something else. So I have all this energy,
Right.
And I was afraid to try a regular marathon because, the people who run those are pretty freaking fast. And I'm not a fast guy.
Yeah.
For
them, it's a sprint.
I was 39 years old back then. I'm 49 now. So I Googled what's longer than a marathon, and ultra marathon popped up. I'd never heard of them. And I found an ultra marathon race. It's called the Javelina 100 up in the Phoenix area. And I fucking signed up for it, man. I'm like, I can do this. 100 miles in 24 hours. You'll have to kill me before you get me off there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I didn't make it. I failed.
Yeah.
But I ran 100K, which is my total mileage was like 65 miles because it was a loop, and I went the wrong way on my last loop, a couple extra miles. So yeah. So I've run 100K. I've run a few 50 milers, a few 50Ks, and running is part of my therapy. Being physically fit is part of my therapy. Like I said, I had to get rid of that unhealthy habit and replace it with a healthy habit.
That's right.
And running is my healthy habit. Am I a rock star? Hell no. Was I a rock star wrestler in high school? Hell no. I once got pinned by a state champion in 3 seconds, but it's that intestinal fortitude that I learned back then and growing up in the Midwest, that hard work will pay off.
It will, man.
And you understand really quickly doing ultra marathons that your brain is going to tell you to quit, because that seed of doubt gets planted. And once it starts taking roots, it's hard to fight off.
But Kurt doesn't have a governor. You don't have a governor.
And that's why I do ultra marathons. But the hell with these half marathons. That's right.
Look,
but
Kurt,
your body can take so much more than your mind will allow it sometimes. You just have to overcome that.
Well, look, Kurt, I appreciate you sharing with us your path in the military, your path in law enforcement, and some of the personal matters that you had to deal with. And I'm honored to know you, but I still got to leave you with this challenge, man. What's next for Kurt? You didn't have an answer for that. I want you to think about that, because we have to think of our next move. Because if we don't evolve, if we don't change, if we don't reinvent ourselves, we get stuck. You're going to fall back into that rut. And I'm sure you have a pretty good idea. You have a pretty good idea.
It's going to be something to do with mental health, for sure.
There you go. Go after it, man. I appreciate your time. Much success to you in the very near future. Much success to your family. and it's been great to have you here today. And look, you can find Kurt on Facebook. You can find him running down the street. And by the way, some guy even tried to impersonate you on Facebook, and I knew it wasn't you. I knew
really?
That wasn't you. All right. So look, man, thank you again for your service. I appreciate you. And we'll be seeing each other very soon.
All right. Thank you, Lou, and I love you, brother.
Thank you, man.
All right. Rock out.